Big LEZ'S League, an all rugby league
To
experience.
next year. Let's kick on to the Gold Coast Titans. 2024 season, they finished 14th, same as last year too, which is quite funny. And a lot of their stats are quite similar to last year. 8 wins, 16 losses, 488 points scored, 656 points against. What was your takeaway from the Gold Coast Titans this season?
Oh, they had an interesting season. I think it was very rocky, especially to begin with. A lot went wrong for them, but I think they found some gold throughout the season. I backed them to get into the eight. I thought we're starting to see enough towards the end of 2023 that they were going to hit their mark and maybe potentially land there. And it just did not start off well this season for them at all. I thought it was all over when they lost Tino. Once that happened, I was like, nah, put a line through them. They're potentially going to come last. The way that they were losing those games seemed like that. But then as the season went along, I think they discovered a little bit about themselves and a couple of, interesting new players coming through. So, yeah, no, they had an interesting season.
Yeah, 7 in a row to start the year they lost, which was a real rough start to the year for them for sure. Just figuring stuff out still a little bit. Tino hurt as well. I think what's going to hurt them going into next year, and not trying to turn this too much into a preview, but it did hurt them this year as well, is the fullback drama. Because you've got obviously Keanu Kinney, you've got Jaden Campbell, AJ Brimson, who's signed very, very long term now as well. He's linked himself in long term. But fitting all those guys in, plus you've got Carter Gordon, you've got Kieran Foran, you've got Tanner Boyd, you've got Tom Weaver, you've got Jalen DeGroot. There's so many guys that should be playing first grade in this side. I think they've done themselves a real disservice with how heavily stacked they are in the spine. And look, depth-wise, it's the dream. But, I mean, it really hurts because they all should be playing first grade. And I think that whoever doesn't play first grade the longest could end up requesting a release and getting out of there. What are your thoughts?
I totally agree with that. It's not necessarily the worst problem to have, but you don't want to be at the bottom of that list, like you were saying, and then losing such high quality players because they've got so many there. Like, where do you fit them all in? You got 3 or 4 guys that could be first pick in pretty much any team playing at fullback. I think Keanu Kenny needs to be in there somewhere. He's really proved himself throughout the season. But AJ, like, when he's fit and firing, he's up there with the best of them as well. And then you've got bloody Campbell laying around. So, yeah, it is going to be tricky for them to figure all that out. I personally think Jaden Campbell at 6 is the go. I think he's actually gone quite well there. AJ, I just don't see him in the centres, though. That's the only problem. So whether you've got, somebody else at 14, him at fullback, or Keeney, yeah, I'm not too sure what you do there. It's going to be a tricky one for them to tackle.
Mate, it will, 100%. I really like what I've seen from Carter Gordon too in Q Cup. I think he fits in there. And I almost think that he could fit in at left centre, which will be very interesting for Brian Kelly too, who obviously was decent towards the back end of the year as well. Had some real great games in there. But he really looks promising. I think he does look like a centre back rower, more so just with the sheer size of him. He's probably just a little bit bigger than Matt Burton and around that 100 kilo mark. So he's a absolute unit of a bloke. Carter obviously played fly half in rugby union, for those of you who don't know, which is essentially halfback 5'8". But yeah, look, I think that just with the sheer size of him, what he could do to defensive lines as well, just with his running game, he's got a really good passing game. I think that he is definitely a guy that's going to be in and around this side too. On that left side, for me, his best spot would be left centre. But in regards to the fullbacks, getting back on topic a little bit, Jaden Campbell, for me, I agree. He's a 6. I think AJ probably starts the year at fullback because you cannot put him on the bench or in the centres again. I just don't think you can do that. He just has no impact. For me, Keanu Kinney probably sits in jersey 14 or 17, to be honest. I think that they can afford to have that jersey 17 with the size of the pack. You've got Mo Fodawaker, you've got Tino, you've got Regan Campbell-Gillard. Keelan Palacio, I think, has signed with the Super League, which I think sort of went under a few people's noses. but they still have a lot of size in that pack. They've got Isaac Fastolamalawi there too, who's sort of creeping around. Klesser Haas, obviously had a little bit of a up and down end to the year, but certainly is a guy to watch going into next season. I think that with the size of the pack they have, they can afford to have that jersey 17. So it sort of frees up someone to sit in jersey 14 too, if you need another hooker there. Look, it's going to be such a mind. Again, excuse my French, but a mind fuck for Des Hasler, sort of sitting there trying to figure out how to put this team together and where all people go. But I think, I think a certainty has to be AJ Brimson cannot sit in the centers in 2025.
I totally agree. And yeah, just listing those players, it's an exciting time, I think, to be a Titans fan. They are going to have quite the team, at least on paper, moving into the next season. It kind of, I'm not going to try to speak too much about the Broncos, but young, just kind of X factor talent that they've got available reminds me a little bit of that kind of Broncos setup where they've got some serious attacking players with some big quality forwards to knock down the door for them. So, maybe it won't come all, it might not all come together, but they've got the ability there to really upset a few teams. So, yeah, it's going to be head noise for old Desi, but I'm sure he's going to be able to pull something together.
Yeah, well, we'll have to wait and see, but we'll get more into that in the preview. Attacking stats, let's go through them. Points per game, they scored 20, which is 14th. Line breaks, 4.7 per game, which is 10th. Tackle bus, they were 34.5 per game, which is 8th. Meters, 1,437, which is 9th. Offloads, 8.6 per game, which was 11th. They had errors, 9 per game, which is last. So the least amount of errors per game, which is really good. It's a great sign going into next year. Completion rate, 82%. So second highest completion rate out of any team. Great to hear. Points conceded. This is where it sort of starts to get a little bit interesting as well. 27.3 points per game conceded. They were 4th highest. Missed tackles, 34.7, which is 9th. Penalties conceded, 4.8, which is last. So great discipline. And then sin bins, 3, which is second last. So again, really great discipline. But yeah, just a little bit to fix up there defensively. Other than that, there's some real positive signs going into next year.
There is, those stats really pop out. The penalties conceded, the sin bins, and then the completion rate and errors. It all ties together where they're able to hang on to that ball for so long. Defense kind of let them down a little bit, but if they're able to move forward with anything like that, it's definitely great signs for them.
A little bit of defense, but also just the quality of attack. They've got a team to have a really fast pace quality of attack. If they can keep that completion rate or at least top it, potentially top it as well, keep the errors to, around that 8, 9, or even get lower than that per game. And then obviously have that great quality of attack, play that fast football. I think that Chrissy Randall will probably keep that 13 jersey too. So they're going to be able to have a guy that's a bit of a smaller 13 that can get the ball out to the edges quickly, and obviously have a bit of a ball playing game there through the middle. I certainly think they're going to be a very, very hot looking team going into next year in regards to a finals threat. I think they can be a finals threat next year, and a lot of those stats do lead towards that as well. And as you said, mate, the discipline with the sin bins, the send-offs, the penalties, but then also the errors, to be last for errors. You look at the Titans season and then you look at these stats, it's something you probably wouldn't have picked.
No, it doesn't almost marry up with where they ended up, to be honest. It's going to be interesting. Like I said, they're going to be electric, I think, moving into next season, pending fitness for all those players that we've been talking about. I'm very keen to see what they can do.
Where do you see the Titans finishing next season?
I've got them. Like I said, I'd love to see them get into the finals. So I'm going to go 8th to 10th at this point. Potentially that might change a little bit. I might even put them a bit higher, but I'm going to go a bit conservative and we'll go 8 to 10 at this point.
Yeah, look, to be honest, I'm going to go a bit out on a limb here, and I'm going to go 4 to 8th.
Ooh.
It's a bit of a rough one, and it's huge. But I just really like that discipline. I really like the completion rate. Love the low error count. I think all they really need to do is slightly fix up the defense, but then improve that quality of attack and get the result on the last tackle as well. That's going to be huge for them. Fixing out this halves pairing too, depending on what it's going to be throughout the entire year, that can't change. Keep the halves pairing you have round one, which for me, I think will probably be Kieran Foran at 7 with Jaden Campbell at 6. It's probably the most obvious one that stands out there. But just keeping that halves pairing consistent, keeping that quality of attack high, error count low, I think that will be a threat, mate. And they're going to be one of the faster and harder to handle teams in the competition for me. So it will be very interesting to see where they end up.
Yeah, definitely. One thing that I am actually excited about is that forward pack that they're going to have rolling into 2025. They could arguably have one of the best. When you've got a guy like Tino coming back into that team, that is just ridiculous. Just the experience, the size, the power. He's like the spiritual leader of that team. So he's going to get all those boys moving on the front foot. Big RCG as well coming into that team after the season he's just had. If he can play anything like that, then you got your Moe Fodawakas in there, your Fafittas, all those guys. Like they're just going to be elite if they can put it together. And I think Desi just another preseason with them, just kind of mold them how he wants them. I think he's going to have them firing.
It's a blessing to have these guys during the regular season, and obviously, knock on wood, they're all fit. I think it's a blessing, but it's also a curse in the sense that every single one of those guys you just named could play Origin, which could really hurt them. For me, the only one that might stick around and play some regular season football during that Origin period would probably be Regan Campbell-Gillard. I think they're probably going to go for a bit of a newer, younger team over the next few years, and he'll probably be unlucky on a few occasions there. But I'm not saying that he can't get to that Origin standard, which he pretty much was at for most of the year. But I just think that he's obviously getting to the back end of his career now. I think that he'll be one of those guys to miss out, which will be a positive for the Titans to have a guy like that around the pack. Then again, every single one of them, including Regan, could end up playing Origin. You just never know what the injuries are going to be like and stuff like that. So I think it's a blessing during the regular season, but it's also a bit of a curse for them as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I guess it's just so hard to say until it all kind of unfolds next year with what's going to happen with Origin. The New South Wales guys are going to be getting a new coach. We have no idea what they're going to be looking for in players. It seems like he kind of fell out of grace, RCG, with the New South Wales squad, but you never know. You could always end up back in there. So, yeah, you're right. They could definitely be missing a lot of players come that time.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting for next year. But as I said, we'll save it for the preview. Let's kick on to the Warriors. And look, probably one of the more interesting seasons. It is a huge fall off for them as well. But what I will say is that, SJ was injured throughout a lot of the season. They do have a few injuries there. Chance was injured on a few occasions as well. Their backline was pummeled at a stage there. They were playing a reserve grade side, which was just hectic. But I think you can take some, I guess, you can take it positively in the sense that they had the injuries. I think we all expected the Warriors to fall off a little bit going into this season. What was your overall take on the Warriors this year?
Yeah, a disappointing fall off. I was somebody as well that very much got around the Up the Wireless movement last year, so I'm half Kiwi, so I can claim it. It's all right. But yeah, no, it was a bit disappointing. But similar to the Titans, I think they have found some little, glimmers of hope coming through that team. So I think there are positives to take out of it. SJ, a huge out considering the season he had, just about snagging the Dally M, but one of the ones that I think was one of the most impactful outs that they had was Luke Metcalf, I think. And that combination that him and SJ had, I think that was very much a downfall and really disrupted the way that they played throughout this season.
I think he's going to be the future there in the halves too. I think that he's 100% going to be in the conversation next year for the halves. For me, right now, it's probably Tomato Martin and Luke Metcalf there, 6 and 7. Obviously either or for both of them. They could both end up on either jersey, but I think that's your halves pairing going into the start of the year. A little bit unlucky for Chanel Harris-Tavita, obviously just coming back into the game after taking that year off. It will be interesting to see how this side is lined up. They obviously lose Adam Fanua-Blake, but gain James Fisher-Harris, which is just absolutely insane. But, mate, a big part of the year and, keeping around that 13th sort of mark was Adam Fanua-Blake, was Mitch Barnett, was Tohu Harris. Talk to me about the impact those guys have on this team.
Oh, they're just the cream of the crop. You don't really get much better than those three guys there. I'd say Tohu Harris had maybe a slightly quieter season, maybe compared to last year. But your Mitchy Barnett was just hitting new highs, and Adam Fanua-Blake, you're pretty much getting that same performance each and every week. So, yeah, it was a bit odd, that type of forward pack, and maybe not quite getting the results off the back of it that they were looking for, not able to connect throughout their spine. But yeah, like those guys are top tier.
I think it's a similar sort of run to Jason Taumalolo there for Tohu Harris, in the sense that there's a few injuries starting to creep in, and he's just not playing that quality. He's playing some fucking outstanding football. He's playing a 9 out of 10 every single week, but we're used to seeing that 10 out of 10, and it sort of started to fall off a little bit, and you can sort of start to see a minor decline, and it's crazy we're even saying that about Tohu Harris, but wouldn't shock me if he's in jersey 15 next year. I think that he could, sort of slot into the forward pack more so than being in that 13 jersey with the ball skills that he has. I think he'll move into the front row rotation. I think that Aaron Clark probably starts at 13, either him or Dylan Walker. But then again, it depends on how you want to play Dylan Walker. Who's your 13 for 2025, mate? Who are you looking to chuck in there?
Well, yeah, I guess that really depends. Dylan Walker can do a job, that's for sure. He's somebody that could slot in there. But yeah, Aaron Clark, he is a pretty handy pickup. It'd be hard to go past him. Yeah, I think it's really as well gonna fall down to the fitness of Tohu Harris, really. If he has a good preseason, heals up a little bit, I don't see any reason why they can't stick to him and always move those guys later on if something happens.
Yeah, totally. It will be very interesting to see what they go with. I think that Dylan Walker suits the style of play they want to play with that fast football. He's got great hands. He's a bit of a more mobile guy where he can get a quick play the ball if you need it. He can play a ton of positions as well. But I think that's why you have him as a 14, because he's valuable in that 14 sort of role where he can come on pretty much anywhere from 1 right down to 13 and do a job for you. So I think Aaron Clark's probably the more obvious choice. But as I said, it's going to be interesting to see what they do, and we'll leave it for the preview. Let's get into the review. For the Warriors, as we said, they finished 13th, 9 wins, a draw, and 14 losses. They had 512 points scored. They had 574 points conceded. Going into some of the attacking stats there, they had 21.3 points per game, which was 11th. 4.6 line breaks per game, which was 13th. Tackle bust, 35.2 tackle bust per game, which was 6th. That's crazy. Meters was 1,489, so third most meters gained in the competition, which is not too surprising with the forward pack that they had. Offloads 7.3 per game, which was 14th. Errors 9.1 per game, which was 16th. So the least amount of errors, the second least amount of errors, which is a great sign for them. Completion rate 82%, which was first. They had the highest completion rate out of any team. And then going into the defensive stats, points conceded was 23. Missed tackles 31, which was 14th. Penalties conceded 5.1 per game, which was 11th. 5 sin bins, which is 13th, mate. Those meterage and the errors, completion rate, those are some beautiful signs going into next year.
Oh, it's crazy. The amount of meters that they're able to get is insane, but it's no doubt, considering that forward pack that we just talked about, you got Adam Fanua-Blake running with about 5 guys hanging off him. So, yeah, it's to be expected. The one thing that is super positive, obviously the completion rate. You win games off the back of things like that, but I guess it is a little bit surprising that they weren't able to, maybe pile on the points with such good completion rate and the low errors as well. So yeah, but moving forward, I think definitely a positive thing for them.
Mate, I think it just goes back to the quality of attack. We said a similar thing about the Gold Coast Titans. They complete very well. The errors are low. They can keep the ball in their hands. That we know that for a fact. But it's more so just about the quality of attack. Do you get to last tackle? How successful is that set? Where are you getting to in that set? How can you ice that opportunity on last tackle? Do you get a repeat set? Do you trap a team in their own end for a set defensively? How do you end each set and how's your execution? I think that was a little bit of a concern for the Warriors. This season, I think that their quality attack just didn't meet the standards that they were setting with the completion rate, with, the points per game, what they were able to do, keeping the ball in hand, the error count being as low as it was. I think that their quality of attack didn't suit what they were actually doing on the field, meter-wise, the field position they were getting as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, straight onto that attack with just sort of week in, week out with the Warriors, where they had all the ball, they were doing everything they could, but they just weren't able to convert it to points. And they're just leaving their runs so late every single game. It'd be a real tug of war the whole way through. And I mean, in the last 10 minutes, they'd come alive and just about make these comebacks, but it was just too little too late. So if they're able to sort things out with that attack, I think that's going to, really be the difference. Where they were icing things during 2023, they just weren't able to connect and link up. To get those final plays right. I think kicking wise, particularly like you were mentioning, kind of failed them a little bit. Something that they were still working out. So yeah, definitely stuff that they can put together next season.
Mate, I'll tell you what, you're trying to fix up the quality of attack. The person you want to lose is Sean Johnson, who's obviously retired at the back end of this year. That is a huge loss for the Warriors going into 2025.
Yeah, and I think as well, they very much tried to play that style of footy when Sean Johnson was out, like he was actually in the team, and it just wasn't going to work. There's only one Sean Johnson, so they, I think, kind of lost a little bit of identity maybe in attack, where they were putting in players going, okay, now you're just going to play the same plays, and we just didn't see it play come off. I think where T.R. Martin came in as well, I think he added his own little bit of spice and flavour to it, and we saw that, and we saw the success that actually came off the back of that. But yeah, it's definitely going to be a little bit of soul searching, I think. But Webster, he should be able to, get those boys going. But yeah, it's going to be different without him in that squad.
100%, mate. It is going to be interesting. And obviously, as we said at the start, it's going to be interesting to see what the halves pairing actually is going into next year. If it is Tomato Martin and Luke Metcalf, if it is Chanel Aristevita, that's the man going into next year as well, which didn't really seem like it because he was playing dummy half for majority of the back end of that year. But it'll be really interesting. I mean, I think a big positive for them in their back line, they do get Rocco Berry back, who obviously missed the season with injury. I really liked what I saw from him at the start of the year. Area looked like a real threat, built really well as well. Obviously put on a few kilos during the off season. Looked like he was going to have a big year. Obviously injury really hurt him. But getting him back, I think, is going to be huge, especially losing Marcelo Montoya. Just when you're sort of starting to put this back line together, he's definitely a guy you want back when you're sort of having that headache of how's this side going to look.
Yeah, definitely. One that I'm interested about though is going to be Roger. What they're going to do with him and how he's going to be looking. Because I think for the Warriors, he was very, massive signing coming in, and I don't know if it quite lived up to the expectations or what we might have had expectations for him. I think he was very limited in the centre position. When you saw him, he very much came alive when they had managed to put him in fullback, but you got so many other options there. So I think they got to figure out a way to get him into the game a lot more because he's devastating when he's got ball in hand.
Do you think you chuck him on the wing and give him a roaming license? Is that where you sort of play Roger?
Well, I think they kind of flirted with the idea of that a little bit last season, and it just didn't end up happening. I think they named him maybe once or so there, or they were thinking about doing it, and injuries kind of happened and ended up playing in fullback. So we never really got to see that. I think he is somebody that can almost get that roaming license. He's somebody that needs the ball in hand, and having him sweeping all around the place would just be, head noise for any team having to defend it, having him popping up out of nowhere, because we saw the damage he could do when he did that. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they're going to do.
Are you flirting with the idea of putting him back to fullback?
I don't think so. Like, what are you going to do with Chance? I don't think he's going to be losing that position. And then, you got young Tuapiki as well that emerged, in that fullback position and played very, very well towards the start of the season when Chance was out. So I don't see a world we're going to see him play fullback unless there's injuries in that team.
Yeah, look, it's going to be very, very interesting for me. It's sort of crossed my mind a few times. Do you just throw Roger back into fullback? Chance obviously has played plenty of centre for the Kiwis too on occasion, so he's got that experience there. He's played centre, I think, a few times this year as well, maybe once or twice, or maybe last year. So he's got experience in that centre jersey. If they make that change, it's going to be interesting. I don't think they will, but it's certainly something that it's going to be considered, I think, going into this year. Tane Tuapiki, you just mentioned, it's going to be very difficult to keep him out of this 17 because what he's shown this year, and look, we'll get straight into our shining lights. He's definitely mine. He was outstanding this year.
Yeah, no, he's mine as well. I think him and Keanu Keaney are both just ones that have just shot straight to the top for a lot of people in those fan bases. But yeah, he was outstanding. Very big shoes to fill after the season that Chance had, and he just went in there and made it his own. He was outstanding.
Yeah, really, really solid. I think another guy we can sort of throw into this one as well, and I think personally he's locked in for the left centre spot, is Ali Leatua. He was huge this season, especially when there were injuries. He just seemed to step up every single time, and he is so talented, mate. He is an absolute weapon. I cannot wait to see him next year.
Yeah, he's a bit of a monster. He was devastating when he did get the opportunity to play. I'm very keen as well to see what he's going to be doing moving forward, but hopefully he can find himself a position. I can't imagine he's going to be kept out of the team. He's going to be huge for them.
Yeah, look, we'll see what happens. I think he's definitely in there. I'd almost lock it in for him to get that left center spot. Look, as I said, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Marcelo hopping out, obviously, to go back to the Bulldogs. We'll talk about that, I guess, when we get to the Bulldogs as well, because I think that's going to be interesting in regards to how they shape that back line. But keeping on the Warriors, I think most likely, and look, turning this into a little bit of a preview before we get back into the review, I think you're most likely going to see Ali Leatua sit at left center. I think Roger probably goes to the wing and gets that roaming license, and he can just go from either side of the park and just really create havoc. Your other side is probably Dylan Watene-Zelezniak and probably Rocco Berry, unless I'm sort of skipping on anyone. We've sort of jumped over anyone there. I don't think I have. Harold, I think that's how we're going to look going into next year. But they've got so many young guys in this team where it's going to be very difficult to put this team together in regards to the back line. I mean, Adam Pompey came in a few times, Edward Cozzy. There's certainly some guys that could definitely push their way into this team for sure.
Yeah, definitely. It is going to be interesting. I think they really need to find their way to play without Sean moving forward, kind of find their identity as a team. And but they've definitely got some exciting prospects. If they can put all that together, I think they're going to go well.
How well do you think they're going to go? What's your bracket?
Oh, what do we got? So I think it's going to take a lot for them to push like they did in the 2023 season. I've got them, again, I feel like this is relatively conservative, but I've gone 8 to 10 for the Warriors. I think that's where they're going to be landing. I think they're going to have a little bit of dramas just trying to find that chemistry in the team. But it will be interesting when you've got guys like James Fisher-Harris coming into that. So, adding to that forward pack yet again, yes, you're losing one, but you're gaining potentially one of the best to do it. That's where I've got them.
Give me 10 to 12. I think it's going to take a little bit for them to make a push for the 8. I think that they'd have to absolutely kill it to get into the 8. I think for me, Fisher-Harris for me is going to be huge. We haven't even talked about Fish yet. What a freak of a signing, and such an unexpected signing at the time as well. You just couldn't see him leaving the Penrith Panthers, but Like, huge signing for them. To lose Adam Fanua-Blake, probably the second or third best front rower in the game, and to get James Fisher-Harris is pretty much the next best, if not a little bit better. I mean, huge signing for them and a huge impact for them as well.
Yeah, look, as far as losing a player and gaining another one goes, there are definitely worse ones we had. That is a pretty good pickup. So yeah, you're right. That did really come out of nowhere. There wasn't really any talks of it. Nothing prior to say that James Fisher-Harris wasn't really happy there at Penrith, and there you go. It was all announced and all sorted. So bit of an interesting one. I'm sure he's going to slot in like with no issues at all. So the only thing is, I guess once that signing did happen, I think maybe it was a bit of a coincidence, but the Warriors kind of fell off a little bit straight after that signing as well. It was almost like a bad omen for them in a weird way.
It was a little bit. There was a lot of dramas, obviously, with Adam Fanua-Blake. I think it was around that time where he sort of got that 1 game suspension. And there was just a lot of things happening, injuries, stuff like that. You're totally right. Bad omens there with signing good players. You sign a good player, you have a few dramas and a few suspensions. I'm not sure a lot of other clubs might be willing to take that one. But yeah, look, interesting next year. Fisher Harris, really am keen to see how he goes in this team. Himself and Mitch Barnett's probably going to be one of the more dangerous front row pairings in the comp. You pair that with Tohu Harris coming off the bench. A few other guys in this team. Dimitri Sifakula was outstanding when he came in this year. Zion Mayu'u as well. When he came in this year too, in those 1 or 2 games, he was great. One of the guys that I really enjoyed watching who came on in the back row. Let me just see if I can find him in this list. If not, bloke in a bar, you've got some questions to answer there. But where are you? Where are you? I think his name's Leka Halasima. He was outstanding when he came in too against the Dogs.
He's that real young fella, right?
Yeah, very young, came off the bench and played in the back row and pretty much had the best 20-minute debut you'd ever seen.
Yeah, no, they've got some great players coming through. They seem to be starting to put a lot more into their kind of grassroots footy as well. So I think we're going to see a lot more players coming out of New Zealand, which is really exciting.
Yeah, very exciting time for the New Zealand Warriors. Some great young forwards in this team. Very keen to see how they go next year. Let's move to your team, the Brisbane Broncos. Look, an interesting year for the Broncos. 12th, they finished on the ladder after finishing second the year before and getting into the grand final. As a Broncos fan, mate, what was your grasp on the season? And sum it up in a few words.
I don't want to talk about it. Would be where I land. It was very disappointing. After the heights that we reached last season, we had 9 fingers on the trophy. We all know what happened after that. So yeah, it was just very disappointing to see the fall off. Many factors. There's no excuses for it. Just disappointing.
Yeah, finished 12th there. Obviously had 10 wins, 14 losses, 537 points scored, 607 points against. We'll move into the attacking stats there. 22 points per game, which was 9th most. Line breaks 4.7, which is the 10th most. Tackle bust 32.5 per game, which is 11th in the competition. Meters 1,351, which is 3rd last most meters gained as well. And particularly with the forward pack you guys have, that is definitely a discussion point there. We'll get back to it in a second. Offload 6.5 per game. They were last for offloads. They were first for errors with 11.5 per game. Completion rate was second last with 16th, 77% completion rate there. Defensively, points conceded 25.3 per game, which is the 6th most. Missed tackles 32.3, which is 13th there, 13th most missed tackles. Penalties conceded 4.9, 15th, so second last, which is pretty good for penalties. Sin bins 4, which is the 4th last there as well there. For the Broncos, mate, I'll tell you what, the meters stands out to me. Offloads, what stands out to you?
Yeah, the meters aren't great, are they? Yeah, the points as well is a little bit concerning. We're a team that had so much firepower last season, and I just don't think ever fully found our stride as we went along. The errors, though, is what hurt the most as a fan watching them throughout the season. They made an uncomfortable amount of errors. It was killing me watching games. You just want to pull your hair out. I think as well defensive wise. So we're probably arguably the best attacking team, if not second best attacking team in 2023. First or second best, sorry, in defense as well in 2023. Just to see the drop off has been heartbreaking. Everything that kind of worked well for us, that we could really pride ourselves on just didn't really work out the way we probably thought it was going to, this season. So it was a bit rough, but the errors, yeah, that's where I think we're just handing over the ball so cheaply. A lot of penalties as well that were given away. It might be, fourth, fifth tackle, whatever it might have been, and just giving other teams six again, and it just killed you. So yeah, it was a bit rough.
Well, mate, the first 12 games was probably, the better 12 games that you had in that season. Obviously started quite well, had the loss against the Roosters at the start of the year. Then obviously beat South, but that wasn't really hard with how they went this year. Panthers, you lost against them, which is understandable. You beat the Cowboys 38-12. Then you lost against the Storm, again, understandable, but it was only 2 points difference. You then went 3-game winning streak against the Dolphins, Raiders, Tigers. Lost against the Roosters in a big one. You beat the Eels and Manly quite well, obviously a 1-point game against Manly, and then lost to the Titans 34-36, which was still a pretty close game, and I don't think many people saw that one coming. Then after that, you had 4-5 losses in a row. Beat the Knights 2 in a row, lost against the Dogs and Titans, had a win there against the Cowboys, and then obviously beat the Eels and lost to the Dolphins and Storm. So, look, it was a great start to the season, but definitely a little bit of fall off between round 14 and round 23. Yeah, really interesting year for the Broncos. Definitely a positive start, but you really can't pinpoint exactly what went wrong because, as you said, the strike power was there. You had all the ingredients to go into a grand final again. You just really couldn't pinpoint what the actual issue was.
Yeah, it was a bit of an odd one. I think it's just about a million different things going wrong. Like you said, it is hard to pinpoint. Again, not trying to make up any excuses for the way things went. But if you were going to throw out a few things, I guess a lot of key players were missing at the same time with injuries, things like that. It's another one too. It's hard to know if anything was kind of happening behind the closed doors there at Red Hill that was, kind of adding to everything. Whether or not people were happy with the coach, we've seen everything that's happened with that as well. But they definitely went on a skid towards the end there, and it was pretty rough hanging on hope when I think like looking on social media and you get your memories and everything on there, like photos of last year being at the semi-finals and whatever else at Suncorp, and you look at a year ago and you're way up here, and then you're holding out hope, doing the math just to see if you can make the top 8, and it's not a good spot to be in. Bit of a change for the season, but yeah, it was interesting. Defense wise is one thing that really killed me as a Broncos fan, just going from one of the best defensive teams, similar to Penrith last year, where they could just, no matter what happened, that you can just defend set up the set, and they were giving away tries pretty cheaply, particularly towards the back end of things. You can see where things really went wrong with the Bulldogs, the Dolphins, Storm, teams like that. It just kind of all fell apart. So yeah, a bit of a rough one.
It was really interesting to see that fall off, especially with such a positive start to the year. I think that stands out to me going into next year. 5 spots left in the top 30 at the moment, pending a lot of guys and their player options. But you've had no gains so far for next season. No one is going to the Broncos next year. No new gains. You do lose Tristan Sailor, who obviously goes to the Super League, which I think hurts a little bit in regards to that fullback depth. Jordan Pereira obviously announces his retirement. Look, really, really interesting that you haven't had any gains yet, particularly with the Broncos, who is such an establishment where a lot of guys are attracted to go there and become a part of that success. We're at a stage now where a year after they've won the comp, like the coach has been sacked and no players are going there or next year at this stage.
Yeah, it is a little bit concerning. I think there are holes in that team that need to be filled. Like I said, there are positions available in that top 30, but I think we need to be making a couple of big signings. Hasn't happened yet. There's all sorts of stuff obviously happening with the club. Don't really need to get super in depth with that at this point. I think I underestimated the impact that we were going to have losing Flegler and Herbie Farnworth for this season. So they were two massive losses. So Flegler, I think, spoke for itself. Like, he was such a 1-2 punch with Payne Haas. They were just ridiculous last season. But I think I underappreciated Herbie. Like, I loved Herbie. He was an absolute gun, but not having the carries and the physical aspect and the defensive reads, that I think really stung us as well. But yeah, for signings, it is a little bit weird that we haven't heard anything too much at this point. So it'll be interesting to see what Madge kind of cooks up and what he decides to go after. I personally think we need maybe some more experienced players in the middle. Someone that has a bit of get up and go and a bit of mungle about him, like your Flegler. I would have really liked to see big Corey Forsborough. From what I've heard, he's staying down in Canberra at this point, but he would be one that I'd like to pick up. I think Christian Welsh has been thrown up as well, somebody that potentially could be coming around. While he might be on like the latter end of his career, the experience that he has would be a massive pickup. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with them.
And before his injury, coming back from the first injury, he was quite good. I thought his impact off the bench was great too, Christian Welsh. So definitely would be a decent pickup. But yeah, look, it will be interesting to see what Madge wants to go for there. I probably don't think it's all good and well to say you missed the impact of Herbie Farnworth, but you never actually replaced Herbie Farnworth. It felt like that position was always up for grabs throughout the year. I don't feel like that position was ever necessarily, locked in. I know Selwyn Cobbo ended up finishing there, but I really don't think that you guys ever actually replaced Herbie Farnworth and that position as well, which I think hurt you throughout the year. I'll tell you what, shining lights though, and it's pretty hectic because this guy's leaving, but one of my shining lights is Tristan Saylor. I think at stages he came in throughout the year, obviously when Reece Walsh was out with injury in Origin, and I think he played very, very well. It was one of those guys that I was always quite impressed with when he came in. Yeah, there was obviously a few errors there and things like that, but definitely a guy that, for me at least, when he came in, there was always effort. He always wanted to make the big play. He always wanted the ball in his hands. So I think in that regard, he's one of my shining lights. But who stands out to you, or who stood out to you most this season?
Yeah, well, for Sales, I totally agree with Tristan Taylor. I think he had a pretty rough run there with a lot of a lot of the hate that he got, but he always really tried his hardest every single week, and it all came together in 2023. It just didn't come out for this year. But one for me though would actually be Corey Jensen. I thought he was just Mr. Consistent, kind of did a lot of that, that stuff that might not be the most glamorous, but the amount of tackles, the amount of hit ups, just how good he was every single week when we were missing that big player like your Flegler, somebody that really has an impact. But he just went in there and just did what he needed to do, created that forward pressure and just kept cruising. I thought he was excellent. And I have seen some people kind of give him his flowers for the season that he had, but yeah, I think he was great.
Mate, the fact that he didn't make Origin for game 3 shocks me. The fact that he didn't make Origin for game 1 or 2 shocks me. But the fact that, when they were having a bit of dramas there for Queensland in regards to the forward pack and the impact they were getting from some of their guys, the fact that he didn't make that the Origin team was insane. And, I think that's probably a positive you can take out of the Broncos season as well. There's a lot of these guys that were still playing some decent football throughout the season that were in that contention for rep duties, whether it be incumbency or whether it be just, in relation to pure form. You still had some players that were playing some decent footy, and I think there are positives going into next season for you guys as well.
And another one actually that stood out a bit to me, maybe didn't get to play as much as we'd hoped, but Blake Moser, he is going to be a elite hooker if we can keep our hands on him. He's had some comparisons, which I think people are really jumping the gun and putting a little bit too much pressure on to Cam Smith, which is wild considering Moses only played a handful of games. But I really hope we can find room for him in the team next year on a regular basis.
I think he has to be a 14, right? He was great when he came in and really just was smooth. He just had a real calm head. His service was always great. He always played his role very well. Crazy that he's been compared to Cam Smith, mate. I'll tell you that for free. But I'll tell you what, when he did come in, he just played with such a calm head. His service was always great. And I guess that's sort of where those comparisons you do see coming from, just his ability to just stay calm in those moments, to have that great service, great defensively as well. He's quite a big body for a hooker. I really like Blake Moser. I think he has to be a 14 next year for sure. It will be interesting, this whole hooker debacle they've got, because Corey Pakes is now staying.
Yes.
You've obviously got Billy Walters there, who's your starting 9. Tyson Smoothie as well. What happens with Tyson Smoothie? They tried to throw him into lock at the back end of the year as well, and it was just a bit of a whole weird thing. But it's going to be very interesting how this pack is shaped up going into next year.
Yeah, it's going to be a weird one. We definitely can't be running around with 3 hookers on the team, I don't think, like we were towards the end of last season, towards the end of this season. And then with Madge coming in, Pakes, he's been given the nod that, hey, you might not need to go anywhere after all. So, it's going to be so hard to tell. But I think your Walters and your Moser would be my 2 picks if I had to go for anyone.
Mate, I totally agree. I think that's my 9 and 14 too, to start the year next year. It'll be interesting to see what happens with that whole hooker debacle, as I said, and if one of those guys in Pakes or Smoothie do end up going elsewhere. Obviously, Tyson can negotiate, I believe, as of November 1. Corey Pakes can as well. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there with both of those guys. Where do you see the Broncos finishing up?
Well, if I'm going full Broncos hat on, full GST, then we're going to go 1 to 3. But I think in reality, I think the boys, with the team that we've got, we should be making the 8. I'm going to go 6 to 8, I think, is where we could potentially end up landing.
Mate, I'm close. I think I'm more on the side of 8 to 10. Just to see how everything goes. You want to keep Adam Reynolds on the field for as long as possible. Interestingly enough, he's able to negotiate too as of November 1. So interesting to see what happens there. Does he take on another year? I don't think he does. I think that 2025 will most likely be his last year. But certainly an interesting one there. And then the future after Adam Reynolds too, I think is going to be very, very interesting to see what they do there with him.
Yeah, look, it's no, my love of Renault is well documented at this point. But I think I've seen like Den and Ken talk about it in depth, pretty much saying that that really needs to be the focus. What's going to be happening with the Broncos after Renault goes? Because as much as I'd love to see him keep playing for another season after next year, I just don't think his body is going to have it in him. Hopefully it does, touch wood. Nothing happens to him. He's had some pretty rough injuries this year, but yeah, I realistically can't see him going too much further past last year. And who he's going to be passing that torch to, it's not very clear at this point. So I think that's going to be a massive concern. But if we can keep him fit and firing next year, that'd be great.
Yeah, well, we'll have to wait and see what happens next year. But again, we'll save it for the preview.